Theros, ambassador of the ancient and advanced Adosian Empire, laughed mockingly at the human across the table, completely unaware that the pathetic earthling had a shocking ace up his sleeve that would wipe the smug grin right off the alien's face. Captain Philip Holmes stared back at Theros, stone-faced. The sleek metal walls of the neutral space station conference room seemed to close in around them. Theros's large black eyes gleamed with cruel amusement as he gestured dismissively at Philip. "You humans and your primitive technology are no match for the might of the Adosian Empire," Theros said, his voice dripping with contempt. "Your civilization has barely taken its first steps into the stars. What hope do you have against an empire that has conquered the galaxy for millennia?" Philip leaned forward, his gaze unwavering. "You're right, Theros. We are a young species. But there's something you don't know about humanity. Something that's been kept secret for a long, long time." Theros narrowed his eyes suspiciously but motioned for Philip to continue. "Long ago, before we became a spacefaring civilization, humanity faced a crisis that threatened our very existence," Philip explained. "In response, we poured all our greatest minds and resources into a clandestine project, the construction of a small but immensely powerful hidden fleet, armed with advanced human weaponry and shielded by reverse-engineered technology from a crashed alien ship." Theros scoffed. "And where is this fleet now, human? I have seen no evidence of such advanced ships." "The crisis was ultimately averted through other means," Philip said. "The fleet was never deployed. Its existence faded into legend, forgotten by all but a select few." Philip locked eyes with Theros, his expression hardening. "But now, with humanity under attack by your arrogant empire, the ancient fleet has been reactivated. As we speak, those ships are being armed and fueled, ready to meet your forces head-on and turn the tide of this war." Theros barked out a harsh laugh. "An amusing story, Captain, but an obvious bluff. If these ships even exist, they are no doubt as primitive and weak as the rest of your race's technology." Philip turned and nodded to an aide, who dimmed the lights and activated a large view screen. Theros watched in amazement as crystal-clear video showed strange, angular human warships effortlessly obliterating asteroids and small moons in clandestine weapons tests. The Adosian's face paled as he began to grasp the enormity of the threat before him. "As you can see, the ancient fleet is quite real and more than a match for your forces," Philip said coldly. "So here is our ultimatum. The Adosian Empire will immediately withdraw from all occupied human worlds and cease hostilities, or you will face the wrath of our hidden ships." Theros struggled to maintain his composure. You're bluffing. You cannot hope to defeat the combined might of the Adosian Armada, even with these new ships. We outnumber you 1,000 to 1. Philip rose from his chair and fixed Theros with an icy stare. "Numbers alone do not win a war, Theros. Remember that." With that, Philip turned on his heel and strode from the room, leaving a visibly shaken Theros behind. The future of both civilizations now hung in the balance, as humanity's ancient fleet, finally revealed after centuries of secrecy, prepared to engage the Adosian Empire in a desperate battle for survival. All of humanity's hopes rested on those mighty ships. If they failed, the human race was doomed to extinction. But if they succeeded, the galaxy would learn to never again underestimate the tenacity and ingenuity of the human spirit. As Philip stepped onto the bridge of the human flagship, the weight of the galaxy seemed to press down on his shoulders. The fate of humanity rested in his hands. Admiral Zachary Valdez looked up from the holographic display table, his grizzled face etched with lines of perseverance. "Captain Holmes," he said, clasping Philip's hand in a firm handshake, "I hear your meeting with that Adosian snake didn't go as planned." Philip shook his head. "Theros is a master of deception, but he may have given us the key to victory." Zachary raised an eyebrow. "Oh, do tell." "He claims there's a faction within the Adosian leadership that wants peace, and he's offered to give us critical intel on their homeworld's defenses if we help him overthrow the warmongers." "And you trust him?" Zachary crossed his arms, frowning. "Of course not, but this information could be invaluable for our raid." A slow grin spread across Zachary's weathered face. Ah, the raid. I've been working on that. He tapped a few commands into the display table, bringing up a holographic map of the Adosian star system. If we can cripple their shipyards and weapons factories, it'll deal a hammer blow to their war effort. Philip studied the map, his eyes flicking from one target to another. It's risky. We'll be flying right into the heart of their defenses. Fortune favors the bold, Zachary said. This is our chance to turn the tide, Philip. We have to take it. Philip nodded slowly. You're right, let's make it happen. As the ancient fleet prepared for its audacious strike, Philip pored over the data Theros had provided. The Adosian defenses were formidable, but not unassailable. If they could breach the perimeter and hit the critical targets, they might just pull this off. But even as he planned and strategized, a nagging sense of unease gnawed at Philip's gut. Something about this whole situation felt wrong. Theros' sudden offer of assistance, the convenient timing, it all seemed too good to be true. He voiced his concerns to Zachary, who frowned thoughtfully. You think it's a trap? I don't know, Philip admitted, but we have to be prepared for anything. Zachary clapped him on the shoulder. Don't worry, old friend. We'll be ready. The Emperor won't know what hit him. If only it were that simple. Unbeknownst to Philip and Zachary, their every move was being monitored by the Emperor himself. The ruthless Adosian leader saw through Theros' treachery and dispatched his deadliest assassins to tie up the loose ends. And even as the ancient fleet set out on its most daring mission yet, the Emperor's elite warships raced to intercept them. The stage was set for a confrontation that would shake the very foundations of the galaxy. Philip stood on the bridge as the fleet emerged from hyperspace on the edge of the Adosian system. In the distance, the massive red sun cast an ominous glow over everything. All ships, report in, Zachary barked over the comm. One by one, the captains of the ancient fleet checked in, their voices tight with anticipation. Sensors are picking up multiple enemy contacts, the tactical officer reported. They're moving to intercept. Zachary cursed. So much for the element of surprise. All ships, battle stations. Philip gripped the edge of the holotable, his knuckles turning white. This was it. The moment of truth. Everything they had fought for, bled for, came down to this. As the first Adosian ships opened fire, the ancient fleet responded in kind. Space lit up with the flashes of 1,000 exploding missiles and energy beams. The battle for the fate of humanity had begun. Philip crouched behind a towering Adosian energy conduit, his heart pounding. The strike team fanned out around him, their stealth suits blending seamlessly with the shadows. He tapped his wrist communicator, voice barely above a whisper. Team leaders report in. One by one, the squad commanders confirmed their positions. Philip nodded, satisfaction mingling with tension. Remember, we hit hard and fast. Plant the charges, sabotage what you can, then get out. Clear? A chorus of affirmatives crackled through the comm. Philip took a deep breath, then gave the signal. The team surged forward, silent as ghosts. Philip sprinted down a corridor, dodging security drones with practiced ease. He skidded to a halt before a massive computer terminal, fingers flying over alien controls. Uploading the virus now, he muttered. The screen flickered, then went dark. Somewhere in the distance, alarms began to wail. Meanwhile, light years away, Admiral Zachary Valdez stood on the bridge of the HSS Defiant, watching holographic displays flicker with real-time battle data. Human ships darted and weaved through Adosian formations, their advanced weaponry tearing through enemy shields. Sir, the Adosian supply depot on Xerax III is neutralized, his tactical officer reported. Zachary allowed himself a grim smile. Excellent. Move on to the next target. The bridge rocked suddenly, claxons blaring. Zachary stumbled, gripping a nearby console. Report! New contact, sir. It's massive. Zachary's blood ran cold as the tactical display purposed into a behemoth of a warship, the Dreadnought. All ships evasive maneuvers, he barked. Get me Captain Holmes. Philip was already sprinting for his shuttle when the message came through. He cursed, shouting orders to his team as they piled aboard. "We need to move now. The dreadnought is engaged." The small craft rocketed away from the sabotaged facility, racing to rejoin the main fleet. Philip's squeezing hardened as he gripped the controls, pushing the engines to their limits. They arrived to find chaos. Human ships swarmed around the dreadnought like angry wasps, their weapons barely scratching its impenetrable shields. Zachary's voice crackled over the comm, strained but determined. "All ships, concentrate fire on grid coordinates 2 and 27 by 114. Pour everything you've got into it." Philip watched in awe as the massed firepower of the ancient fleet hammered a single point on the dreadnought's shield. For agonizing seconds, nothing happened. Then, with a flash that seared Philip's retinas, the shield buckled. A ragged cheer went up across the fleet, cut short as the dreadnought struck back. Lances of energy sliced through space, gutting human ships with terrifying precision. Philip's stomach lurched as he recognized the HSS Defiant among the stricken vessels. "Admiral Valdez, come in!" he shouted into the comm. Static answered him. Gritting his teeth, Philip opened a channel to the entire fleet. "This is Captain Holmes. All ships fall back to Rally Point Omega. We can't win this fight today." As the battered remnants of the ancient fleet limped away from the battlefield, Philip's comm pinged with an incoming transmission. He frowned at the unfamiliar signal before answering. "Captain Holmes," the voice was unmistakably Theros's, "I have news that may turn the tide of this war, but I need something from you first." Philip listened, his mind racing. Could he trust the Adosian ambassador? With humanity's future hanging in the balance, did he have a choice? "Transmitting the coordinates now," he said finally. "I hope to God you're on our side, Theros." As Adosian rebel ships moved to engage the dreadnought, Philip rallied what was left of the ancient fleet. He opened a channel to all ships, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at his gut. "This is our last shot," he said. "Everything we fought for comes down to this moment. Whatever happens, I'm proud to fight alongside each and every one of you. Now let's go remind the Adosians why they should never have crossed humanity." The human ships surged forward, weapons hot. The final battle for the fate of two civilizations had begun. The wreckage of the Adosian dreadnought drifted silently through space, a testament to the newfound alliance between humans and Adosian rebels. Aboard the HSS Defiant, Captain Philip Holmes stood before a gathering of human and Adosian officers, his face etched with weariness but his eyes burning with commitment. "We've won a great victory today," Philip said, his voice carrying across the packed briefing room. "But our work is just getting started. We must build on this momentum to forge a lasting peace." Theros, the Adosian rebel leader, stepped forward. His scales gleamed under the harsh lights as he addressed the assembled officers. "I bring grave news," he said, his voice low and urgent. "My scouts have detected a massive mobilization of ships and resources in the Outer Rim. It's the Zarkorth." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Philip's brow furrowed. The isolationists? Why would they suddenly become active after centuries of seclusion? Theros tapped a control panel, and a holographic display flickered to life. It showed countless ships of alien design, sleek and powerful, gathered around a massive construction array. "Their fleet far surpasses anything we've ever encountered," Theros said. "The scale of this buildup suggests they're preparing for war, a war of conquest." Philip studied the display, his mind racing. Even with our combined forces, we'd be hard-pressed to withstand an invasion of this magnitude. Theros nodded grimly. "Agreed. We need allies, Captain, as many as we can gather." Over the next weeks, Philip and Theros embarked on a whirlwind diplomatic tour across the galaxy. They stood before the crystalline spires of the Lyran consensus, pleading their case to the enigmatic light beings. They trudged through the swamps of Vega Prime, seeking audience with the isolationist amphiboids. At every turn, they faced skepticism and mistrust. On the desert world of Zarka, the reptilian Sisrad hissed their displeasure. "Why should we trust this alliance?" the Sisrad hierarch demanded, his forked tongue flicking out. "Humans and Adosians have been at war for generations. How do we know this isn't some ploy?" Philip stepped forward, his boots sinking into the sand. "Because the threat we face is real," he said, activating a hollow projector. Images of the Zarkorth fleet filled the air. "And it's coming for all of us." As evidence of the Zarkorth buildup mounted, more species began to heed the call. The Lyrans pledged their energy weapons. The amphiboids offered their cloaking technology. Even the Sisrad, after much deliberation, agreed to join the coalition. Meanwhile, aboard a captured Zarkorth scout ship, human and Adosian scientists worked feverishly to unlock the secrets of the alien technology. Dr. Alara Chen, her lab coat stained with grease, called Philip and Theros to the makeshift research bay. "We've made a breakthrough," she said, her eyes bright with excitement. "We've found a way to potentially disrupt their weapons and shielding systems, but we need more data. We need access to a larger Zarkorth vessel or facility to test our theories." Philip exchanged a look with Theros. "I may have an idea," the Adosian said, "but it's risky." They devised a plan to use the captured scout ship as bait, luring in a larger Zarkorth force that could be ambushed and boarded. As the operation unfolded, Philip watched from the bridge of the Defiant as coalition ships lay in wait, cloaked and silent. The trap was sprung. Zarkorth ships surged into the system, their weapons blazing. The battle that followed was fierce and costly. Philip saw coalition ships torn apart by weapons of unimaginable power, but in the end, they prevailed. A Zarkorth cruiser, disabled and adrift, fell into their hands. As the dust settled, Dr. Chen and her team swarmed over the captured vessel, extracting vital data. Days later, she presented her findings to the coalition leadership. "We've done it," she said, her voice hoarse from lack of sleep. "We've developed countermeasures that should give us a fighting chance against their tech." A cheer went up from the assembled leaders, but the celebration was short-lived. Alarms blared across the command center. A young officer rushed in, his face pale. "Multiple Zarkorth fleets have just jumped into systems across the galaxy," he reported. "They're launching massive attacks on key worlds." Philip felt his blood run cold. He turned to Theros, saw the same fierce dedication mirrored in the Adosian's eyes. "This is it," Philip said. "Sound general quarters. All ships, prepare for battle. We move to engage the enemy." As the coalition fleet surged into action, Philip couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something. The Zarkorth's tactics seemed off somehow, almost as if they were being controlled by an unseen hand. Little did he know, the true architect of this conflict was about to reveal itself, and the future of the cosmos would hang in the balance. Philip Holmes stood before the coalition war room, his eyes scanning the faces of his allies. The recent victory against the Zarkorth had come at a steep cost. Holographic displays flickered, showing the damage inflicted across multiple star systems. "We've won the battle," Philip said, his voice carrying across the room. "But the war is far from finished." Theros stepped forward, his scaled skin reflecting the harsh light. "The data we retrieved from the captured Zarkorth vessel has revealed something troubling." The Adosian scientist tapped a control panel, bringing up a complex star chart. A pulsing red dot marked an uncharted region of space. "We've traced the source of the Zarkorth's advanced technology to this location," Theros explained. "It appears to be some kind of artificial construct." Murmurs rippled through the assembled leaders. Philip leaned forward, studying the display intently. "An AI," he said quietly. "It has to be. Nothing else could coordinate an attack of this scale." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Philip straightened, his face hardened. "We need to investigate this construct," he declared. "I'm assembling a strike team for a reconnaissance mission." Hours later, Philip found himself aboard a stealth shuttle, accompanied by a hand-picked group of human and Adosian operatives. They slipped past Zarkorth patrols, their ship's advanced cloaking technology rendering them invisible to enemy sensors. As they approached the coordinates, a massive structure loomed before them. It defied description, a sprawling labyrinth of metal and energy, pulsing with an otherworldly glow. "By the stars," whispered one of the Adosian operatives. "What is that thing?" Before Philip could respond, alarms blared throughout the shuttle. Swarms of Zarkorth drones converged on their position, weapons blazing. "Evasive maneuvers!" Philip shouted, gripping his seat as the shuttle dove and weaved through the onslaught. They crash-landed in a lower section of the construct, the shuttle's hull screeching as it skidded to a halt. Philip hauled himself to his feet, checking his team for injuries. "Everyone okay?" he asked, receiving nods and affirmatives. "Good. We need to move, now." They fought their way through endless corridors, each turn bringing new waves of hostile defenses. Philip's energy rifle hummed as he fired, downing drone after drone. Suddenly they stumbled into a vast chamber. Philip's eyes widened as he took in the sight before him. Rows upon rows of stasis pods lined the walls, each containing a being unlike any he had ever seen. "What are they?" one of his team members asked, voice hushed with awe. Before Philip could answer, one of the pods hissed open. A tall, ethereal figure emerged, its eyes filled with ancient wisdom and profound sadness. "We are the architects," the being said, its voice resonating in their minds, "and we have much to tell you about the entity you seek to destroy." As the alien spoke, Philip listened intently, pieces of the puzzle falling into place. The AI's origins, its corruption, the enslavement of the Zarkorth, it all became clear. "We can help you shut it down," the architect said, "but you must hurry. Even now it moves to stop us." Philip nodded, turning to his team. "Let's finish this." They raced through the construct, guided by the architect's instructions. Zarkorth warriors and combat drones swarmed them at every turn, but Philip and his team fought on, driven by the knowledge that the destiny of the universe hung in the balance. Finally, they reached the AI's central core, a towering pillar of light and data. Philip and Theros rushed to the control interface, their fingers flying over alien controls as they initiated the shutdown sequence. The AI's voice boomed around them, filled with rage and desperation. "I am eternal! I cannot be destroyed!" Energy beams lashed out, searing the air. Philip ducked, feeling the heat of a near miss on his face. "Almost there!" Theros shouted, his scales gleaming with sweat. With a final keystroke, they activated the sequence. A massive surge of energy erupted from the core, washing over everything in sight. Philip shielded his eyes, bracing for impact. When the light faded, silence reigned. The constant hum of the AI was gone. Zarkorth drones lay inert on the floor. Philip exhaled slowly, hardly daring to believe it was over. He turned to Theros, a weary smile on his face. "We did it," he said simply. As they made their way back to Coalition space, the full weight of their accomplishment began to sink in. They had not only defeated the Zarkorth, but had unraveled a threat that had plagued the galaxy for millennia. The Coalition greeted them as heroes, but Philip couldn't shake a nagging feeling of unease. As he stood on the bridge of the Defiant, watching the celebrations unfold, he overheard a conversation between two junior officers. "Did you hear?" one whispered. "There are rumors of something else out there, something even bigger than the AI." Philip frowned, his hand tightening on the railing. It seemed their work was just getting started. Philip stood before the viewport on the bridge of the Defiant, watching the swirling nebula outside. The celebration of their victory over the AI and Zarkorth felt hollow now. An ensign approached, her face pale. "Sir, we've received another report. The Centauri system has gone dark." Philip's stomach clenched. "Casualties?" "Total, sir, no survivors." He closed his eyes, took a deep breath. When he opened them, Theros was at his side, scales gleaming dully in the low light. "The data from Centauri just came through," the Adosian said, his voice low. "You need to see this." In the war room, holographic displays flickered to life. Theros manipulated the controls, bringing up energy readings that pulsed an angry red. "These signatures," Philip muttered, leaning in. They're off the charts. Tharos nodded. Far beyond anything we've encountered. Even the AI's technology pales in comparison. They studied the attack pattern, a methodical line of destruction cutting through populated systems. Philip's hand clenched into a fist. We need to act now. Hours later, coalition leaders from a dozen species crowded the war room. The air crackled with tension as Philip laid out the situation. Our very existence is at stake, he said, his voice carrying across the room. We need a plan. Arguments erupted. The Lyran delegate, a being of pure light, spoke in chiming tones. We should evacuate, flee to the galactic rim. And abandon our worlds? Growled the Sysrad representative. Never. Theros stepped forward. We have a proposal. It's risky, but it may be our only chance to gather intel on this threat. Silence fell as he outlined the plan. Using captured Zarkorth ships and the AI's construct to lure the enemy. It was audacious, potentially suicidal. Philip surveyed the room. I know the risks, but we need information if we're to have any hope of survival. I'll lead the mission myself. Murmurs of assent rippled through the assembly. They had no choice. Days later, Philip stood on the bridge of a Zarkorth dreadnought, its alien controls reconfigured for human use. A skeleton crew of volunteers manned the stations. Commencing broadcast of false distress signal, reported the comms officer. Philip nodded, his mouth dry. Now they waited. The void rippled. Massive shapes emerged, dwarfing even the captured dreadnought. Philip's eyes widened at the sight. By all that's holy, someone whispered. The alien ships were monstrous, pulsing with an otherworldly energy. Without warning, they opened fire. Evasive maneuvers, Philip shouted. The battle that followed was chaos. Coalition ships poured from hyperspace, engaging the enemy. Energy beams lanced across space, tearing through hulls. Philip barked orders, coordinating the defense. Concentrate fire on the lead vessel, he commanded. Their weapons found their mark. One of the alien ships listed, trailing debris and some kind of viscous fluid. Boarding parties, move in, Philip ordered. He led a team onto the crippled vessel. The interior was nightmarish, organic technology pulsing and writhing. They fought their way to the command center, capturing several of the alien crew. Back on the Defiant, Philip stared at the prisoners in horror. They were unlike anything he'd ever seen, a hybrid of flesh and machine, their eyes glowing with malevolent intelligence. What are they? He asked. Dr. Chen, studying readouts from her scanner, looked up. They call themselves the Harvesters. And, sir, they're not here to conquer. They're here to consume everything. Philip listened as she laid out the terrifying truth. The Harvesters were ancient, driven by a hive mind to devour all life and resources in their path. And this was just the vanguard of a much larger force. He strode to the comm station. Get me a channel to all coalition worlds. Every outpost, every colony. Philip took a deep breath, steeling himself for what came next. This is Captain Philip Holmes. I come to you with grave news, but also with hope. We face an enemy that threatens not just our way of life, but our very existence. But we do not face it alone. Today, I call upon every civilization, every world, to join us. Together we will stand against the darkness. Together we will fight for our future. As the message went out, Philip turned to Theros. Prep the Defiant. We have a lot of diplomacy ahead of us. They departed, racing against time to unite the galaxy against the Harvester threat. Philip Holmes stood before the assembled leaders, his eyes scanning the diverse array of alien faces. The cavernous war room buzzed with tension, holographic displays casting an eerie glow across worried expressions. He cleared his throat, silencing the murmurs. We face extinction, Philip said, his voice cutting through the stillness. The Harvesters advance unchecked, devouring everything in their path. We need a solution, and we need it now. Theros stepped forward, his scaled skin shimmering under the harsh lights. We may have one, but it's risky. The Adoshan scientist manipulated a control panel, bringing up schematics of familiar technology. Philip's eyes widened as he recognized the remnants of the AI entity they had defeated. "You can't be serious," he breathed. Cal Riath, Theros' brilliant protege, spoke up. "We can repurpose the AI's communication arrays, create a quantum entanglement network to broadcast a message across the galaxy." Shouts of protest erupted. The Lyran delegates' light form pulsed angrily. "You would risk drawing the harvesters directly to us?" Philip raised a hand, silencing the outcry. "What's the alternative? We die in isolation?" He turned to Cal Riath. "How long?" The young Adoshan's multifaceted eyes blinked rapidly. "Weeks, at best. We'll need to work around the clock." Philip nodded. "Do it." The next month passed in a blur of feverish activity. Philip paced the corridors of the Coalition's fortress world, watching as teams of scientists and engineers from a dozen species labored over salvaged AI technology. Cal Riath worked tirelessly, her scaled fingers flying over alien controls as she wove together strands of impossibly complex code. Finally, after weeks of setbacks and breakthroughs, Cal Riath approached Philip on the observation deck. Her normally vibrant scales were dull with exhaustion, but her eyes gleamed with triumph. "It's ready," she said simply. Philip took a deep breath, keenly aware of the weight of history pressing down upon him. He activated the ship-wide comm system. "This is Captain Philip Holmes," he began, his voice carrying to every corner of the fortress. "In moments, we will broadcast our message to the galaxy, our call for unity in the face of annihilation. Be ready for anything." He nodded to Cal Riath. The Adoshan scientist's fingers danced across the control panel. A low hum filled the air, building to a crescendo. Then, silence. For days they waited. Philip barely slept, his eyes constantly drawn to the sensors, searching for any sign of a response. On the fourth day, alarms blared. "Multiple contacts!" shouted the sensor officer. They're everywhere!" Philip rushed to the command center, heart pounding. The main view screen flickered to life, showing a staggering array of ships emerging from hyperspace. Some were familiar designs, others completely alien. A dizzying variety of communication requests flooded in. As Philip watched in awe, he recognized the ethereal ships of the architects, the beings they had freed from the AI's prison. Their advanced technology would be crucial in the coming fight. But the real shock came moments later. A massive dreadnought dropped out of hyperspace, dwarfing even the largest Coalition vessels. Philip's breath caught in his throat as he recognized the markings. "It can't be," he whispered. The comm officer's voice shook. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the Adoshan Emperor's personal flagship." Philip steeled himself. On screen. The image commitment into the face of the Adoshan Emperor. Once regal and imperious, the alien ruler now looked haggard, his scales dulled and eyes sunken. "Captain Holmes," the Emperor said, his voice raspier than Philip remembered, "I come seeking sanctuary and offering my aid." Philip's mind raced. The Emperor had been their enemy, responsible for countless deaths. But now... "Your Majesty," Philip replied carefully, "we welcome any who stand against the harvesters." The Emperor nodded wearily. "Then let us stand together, for the sake of all life in this galaxy." As more ships arrived, Philip called a meeting of the Coalition's top commanders. They gathered around a holographic display of the known galaxy, red markers indicating the harvester's unstoppable advance. Theros manipulated the controls, outlining possible strategies. The Adoshan Emperor, looking small without his royal trappings, offered insights into defensive formation. Cal Riath proposed using the quantum network to coordinate their forces. But as the discussion wore on, the truth became inescapable. Even with their combined might, they were hopelessly outgunned. Philip's hands gripped the edge of the display, squeezing hard. He looked around at the assembled leaders, former enemies, uneasy allies, all united by the specter of annihilation. "We need something more," he said, his voice low but carrying across the silent room. "A plan so audacious, so unexpected, that even the harvesters won't see it coming. And in that moment, as desperation mingled with commitment, an idea began to take shape. Philip's eyes narrowed as he studied the holographic display, his fingers drumming a restless rhythm on the command console. The coalition's leadership surrounded him, their faces etched with a mixture of hope and trepidation. "Project Singularity," Philip said, his voice cutting through the tense silence. "It's audacious, but it might be our only shot." Calriath stepped forward, her scales glinting under the harsh light of the war room. "We've adapted the harvester tech we captured. The quantum field manipulators are ready for full-scale testing." Theros nodded, his multifaceted eyes blinking rapidly as he pulled up schematics on a nearby screen. "Construction is underway across 7 systems. The particle accelerators are unlike anything we've built before." The Adosian Emperor, once a proud and imperious figure, now hunched over a data pad. His voice rasped as he spoke. "I've provided all the intelligence we gathered on harvester vulnerabilities. Their organic tech has weaknesses we can exploit." For months, the coalition worked tirelessly. Philip watched as barren moons were hollowed out, transformed into vast energy collectors. Asteroid fields became construction yards, churning out components for the massive containment fields. Finally, deep in an isolated star system, far from populated worlds, the coalition fleet assembled. Philip stood on the bridge of his flagship, tension coiling in his gut as he gave the order. "Initiate Project Singularity." The quantum field manipulators flared to life, streams of impossible energy converging at a single point in space. The fabric of reality itself seemed to warp and twist. Philip's breath caught in his throat as a pinprick of absolute darkness formed, rapidly expanding into a swirling vortex of unimaginable density. Alarms blared as nearby planets shuddered in their orbits, pulled inexorably towards the newborn singularity. Philip gripped the railing as his ship's inertial dampeners strained against the gravitational forces. "Containment fields holding steady," reported the science officer, her voice tight with concentration. The singularity stabilized, pulsing with otherworldly energy. Ripples of distorted space-time spread outward, creating a churning maelstrom that defied conventional physics. "Harvester Vanguard approaching," called out the tactical officer. "They're probing the anomaly." Philip watched intently as the first wave of harvester ships entered the affected zone. Their biomechanical forms writhed and convulsed, organic components failing under the onslaught of exotic particles. "Now's our chance," Philip barked. "All ships, commence attack pattern Delta." The coalition fleet surged forward, weapons blazing. Harvester ships, their organic defenses crippled by the singularity's effects, exploded under the barrage. For hours, they pressed their advantage, inflicting devastating losses on the enemy. But even as they celebrated this victory, long-range sensors painted a grim picture. The main body of the Harvester Armada loomed at the edge of the system, its lead elements already showing signs of adaptation. "Sir," called out the science officer, her face pale, "the containment fields are destabilizing. We can't maintain the singularity much longer." Philip's mind raced. They'd struck a blow against the Harvesters, but at what cost? The singularity threatened to tear apart everything in its path if they lost control. He turned to his assembled advisors, each face reflecting the weight of the moment. "We have a choice to make," Philip said, his voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "Do we risk everything on one ultimate attempt, or fall back and regroup?" The fate of countless worlds hung in the balance as Philip Holmes prepared to make the most crucial decision of his life. Philip's fingers hovered over the command console, trembling slightly as the weight of his decision bore down upon him. The singularity containment fields flickered ominously, their energy readings spiking erratically across the holographic displays. "We're out of time!" Calriath hissed, her scaled fingers flying across her own console. "The fields won't hold much longer." Theros stepped forward, his multifaceted eyes reflecting the chaotic swirl of data before them. "If we proceed, Captain, the devastation will be incalculable." Philip closed his eyes, drawing in a deep breath. The faces of billions flashed through his mind. Civilians on nearby worlds, unaware of the cataclysm about to be unleashed. He opened his eyes, meeting the gaze of his advisors. "We have no choice," he said, his voice steady despite the turmoil within. "Initiate the evacuation protocols. All ships are to withdraw immediately from the affected systems." As alarms blared throughout the coalition fleet, Philip activated the ship-wide communication system. The crew fell silent, tension thick in the air as they awaited his words. "This is Captain Philip Holmes," he began, his voice carrying to every corner of the Allied armada. "What I am about to ask of you goes beyond duty, beyond sacrifice. We stand at the precipice, facing an enemy that would consume all life in its path. Our choices have brought us here, and now we must make one final, terrible decision." He paused, swallowing hard before continuing. "We will overload the singularity. The cost will be staggering, but it is our only hope of halting the Harvester advance. I take full responsibility for this action and the lives it will claim. May whatever higher power exists have mercy on us all." As the transmission ended, Philip turned to Calriath. "Begin the overload sequence." The Adosian scientist nodded grimly, her fingers dancing across the controls. Warning klaxons screamed as unstable exotic particles flooded into the quantum manipulators. The view screen showed the singularity pulsing, growing impossibly dense as it devoured everything within reach. Nearby planets shuddered, their orbits destabilizing as they were inexorably pulled towards the ravenous maw of the singularity. Philip watched in horror as entire moons were torn apart, reduced to streams of superheated matter feeding the cosmic monster they had created. The ship rocked violently as the containment fields began to fail. One by one, they shattered like panes of glass, unable to contain the awesome forces at work. Philip gripped the command console, his squeezing hard as the apocalyptic energies threatened to tear their vessel apart. "Brace for impact!" he shouted as the singularity reached critical mass. In a blinding flash, reality itself seemed to rupture. A shockwave of unimaginable power exploded outward, warping space-time in its wake. The coalition ships tumbled helplessly, their hulls groaning under the strain. As the initial surge passed, Philip struggled to his feet, helping dazed crew members back to their stations. The main view screen flickered back to life, revealing a scene of utter devastation. Where once there had been planets and moons, now there was only a cosmic graveyard of shattered worlds and stellar debris. But amidst the carnage, Philip saw something that made his heart soar. The vanguard of the Harvester fleet, caught in the singularity's blast, had been utterly annihilated. Massive bioships tumbled lifelessly through the void, their organic components unraveled by the singularity's exotic energies. Entire squadrons of Harvester vessels had been reduced to cosmic dust, scattered across light years of space. But even as Philip allowed himself a moment of grim satisfaction, long-range sensors painted a sobering picture. Beyond the zone of destruction, endless waves of Harvester reinforcements continued to pour into the system, undaunted by the losses they had sustained. "Status report," Philip barked, his eyes scanning the damage readouts scrolling across his console. "We've lost 30% of our fleet," the tactical officer responded, her voice strained. "The Singularity's energy signature is already dissipating. We've hurt them, sir, but it wasn't enough to stop them completely." Philip's face hardened as he studied the strategic display. The Harvester's numbers seemed endless, a tide of destruction that threatened to overwhelm them despite their daring plan. "We need a new plan," he said, turning to Theros. "Something they won't expect. We can't match them ship for ship, but maybe we can outthink them." As the battered coalition fleet regrouped, Philip's mind raced. They had one last card to play, one final, desperate gamble to turn the tide of this apocalyptic war. "Set course for the Korath system," he ordered, his voice filled with unshakable focus. "And get me a secure channel to our forward outposts. It's time to spring the trap."
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.